Truman Capote, the renowned American author, is widely remembered for his literary masterpiece, In Cold Blood. However, it was not only his writing prowess that pushed him to the top of literary charts and high society. Capote had a unique ability to charm and befriend a circle of high society women who he dubbed his Swans. These women, with their style, wealth, and connections, epitomized the glamour and sophistication of high society in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. But behind the scenes of this thoroughly enthralling social scene lurked a story of ambition, betrayal, and shattered friendships. The 2024 FX show FEUD Capote versus the Swans portrays the complex dynamics between Truman Capote and his anointed swans. Set against the backdrop of the fashionable world of New York society, the show unveils the scandal-filled sophistication of Manhattan's upper echelon in the context of Capote's narcissistic need for affirmation and attention, which ultimately led to the writer's downfall. Welcome to our channel, where we bring you the real and true history behind popular TV shows and movies, past and present. In this video, we will look at the historical account of who Truman Capote was, how his life events compelled him to betray the women he befriended, and uncover exactly what happened that culminated in the vehement feud that destroyed his career. Born in 1924 in New Orleans, Truman Capote had a tumultuous childhood marked by his parents' separation. Raised by relatives in Monroeville, Alabama, Capote rose above a childhood troubled by divorce, a long absence from his mother, and multiple migrations. As a lonely child, Capote taught himself to read and write before he entered his first year of school. He had never wavered from his calling as a writer, and he honed his writing ability throughout his childhood. Capote was often seen at age 5, carrying his dictionary and notepad, and began writing fiction at age 11. On Saturdays, he made trips from Monroeville to the nearby city of Mobile on the Gulf Coast, and at one point submitted a short story called Old Mrs. Busybody to a children's writing contest sponsored by the Mobile Press Register. Of his early days, Capote once stated in an interview,
"I was writing really sort of serious when I was about 11. I say seriously in the sense that, like other kids go home and practice the violin or the piano or whatever, I used to go home from school every day, and I would write for about 3 hours. I was obsessed by it."
In 1932, he attended the Trinity School in New York City. He then attended St. Joseph Military Academy. In 1939, the Capote family moved to Greenwich, Connecticut, and Truman attended Greenwich High School, where he wrote for both the school's literary journal and the school newspaper. When they returned to New York City in 1941, he attended Franklin Public School, then an Upper West Side private school now known as the Dwight School, where he graduated in 1942. That was the end of his formal education. In his last year of school, he began his professional career at age 17, writing short stories for the New Yorker magazine. Between 1943 and 1946, Truman Capote wrote a continual flow of short fiction. His stories were published in both literary quarterlies and well-known popular magazines, including The Atlantic Monthly, Harper's Bazaar, Mademoiselle, The New Yorker, Prairie Schooner, and Story magazine. In June 1945, the short story, Miriam, was published by Mademoiselle magazine and went on to win a prize, Best First Published Story, in 1946. The critical success of Miriam attracted the attention of Random House Publishing and resulted in a contract to write Capote's first published novel entitled Other Voices, Other Rooms. The semi-autobiographical novel of Truman's childhood focuses on a lonely, effeminate 13-year-old New Orleans boy who is sent to live with his father in rural Alabama after his mother dies. Gaining critical acclaim and notoriety for its groundbreaking homoerotic themes, the promotion and controversy surrounding Other Voices, Other Rooms became Capote's entrance into the world of fame and recognition, something that he craved and nurtured his entire life. Starting with the erotically charged photograph of the young author on the back of his first novel, Truman went to great lengths to remain in the spotlight at all costs. In essence, He was an insecure gay man that needed motherly love and attention while at the same time had a deeply hidden jealousy of the charm, beauty, and grace of the women who he secretly feared would someday abandon him, just as his mother had. Capote went on to boost his fame with Breakfast at Tiffany's, published in 1958, and adapted for the screen in 1962 to critical and commercial success. But it was in cold blood. A journalistic work about the murder of a Kansas farm family in their home, published in 1966, that catapulted the author to the pinnacle of fame he so desperately craved. Continually sought after, Capote entrenched himself more deeply in the world of the New York jet set, becoming best friends with his bevy of swans who would share their most intimate thoughts, feelings, and secrets to the man who would cruelly and without remorse ultimately betray them. Now that you know who Truman Capote was and the psychology behind the man, it's time to move on to exactly what happened that brought Capote to his knees and fractured the lives of the women who had so naively trusted him. Truman Capote's Swans were a constellation of the most dazzling stars in the firmament of New York's high society. The Swans included Babe Paley, aka Barbara Cushing Mortimer Paley, wife of CBS founder William S. Paley; Nancy Slim Keith, or simply Slim Keith, socialite and former wife of film director Howard Hawks; Morella Agnelli, Italian aristocrat and wife of Fiat chairman Johnny Agnelli; Gloria Guinness, socialite and fashion icon; and CZ Guest, aka Lucy Douglas Cochran, Countess of Worcester, American stage actress and socialite. By the mid-60s, Capote had had 2 decades to explore the deepest recesses of their lives, 2 decades to listen to their secrets, 2 decades to deeply understand them. He had everything he needed to write about them with depth and nuance, exploring both the good and the bad, the light and the darkness. On January 5, 1966, Capote signed a contract with Random House to write a novel called Answered Prayers. Random House gave Capote an advance of $25,000, and the contract stipulated that the completed manuscript would be delivered by January 1, 1968. When he began working on Answered Prayers, Capote predicted that it would be his magnum opus. His great work capturing the essence of the society he was oh so intimately familiar with, the high society of New York in the mid-20th century, and the women of wealth, sophistication, and social prowess who populated it. But as time went on, Capote missed his original deadline. He negotiated a larger advance for a later deadline. The deadline date kept moving, and Capote kept getting more and larger advances, something that Random House Publishing was beginning to grumble about. So after missing those first paid deadlines, Capote decided to publish a few chapters of Answered Prayers in magazines, just to prove to Random House that he was indeed still working on the book. The first published chapter, titled Mojave, appeared in the June 1975 issue of Esquire, but the one that really caught people's attention was La Côte Basque 1965, which appeared in the November 1975 edition of Esquire. While Mojave was well received by readers, and even Tennessee Williams sent a compliment to Capote, La Côte Basque 1965 proved to be so controversial that it would ultimately become Capote's undoing. Set in a real French restaurant in New York City, La Côte Basque 1965 sees the novel's narrator, P.B. Jones, meeting with his friend, Lady Ina Coolberth, to gossip about their high society cohorts. What followed was a series of scandalous, thinly veiled revelations about all of Capote's rich, well-connected friends. He changed all their names, but it was obvious who he was writing about. Lady Coolberth was a stand-in for Slim Keith, although Truman disputed this claim, but even Keith herself was sure the character was based on her. Babe Paley and her adulterous husband William were portrayed as Cleo Dillon and her adulterous husband Sidney, detailing all of the real-life Williams' infidelities. The most notorious part of the chapter includes a fictionalized version of a real-life homicide case that actually did happen within their jet-set circle. In 1955, the real-life businessman William Woodward was shot by his wife Anne in their home. Anne claimed she mistook her husband for an intruder, but a rumor suggested that she killed him intentionally. Truman Capote took that rumor and ran with it, creating a character named David Hopkins, murdered by his wife Anne. Capote didn't even change the wife's name. Just before the chapter was published in Esquire, Anne took her own life. No reason was given, but some people, including Woodward's mother, thought she had advance warning of Capote's story. As soon as La Côte Basque 1965 was published in Esquire, Truman Capote was cut off from his high society social circle and all his wealthy friends turned their backs on him. According to gossip columnist Liz Smith, New York's high society discussions were immediately filled with vitriol towards Capote, with some calling for revenge. Most of Capote's socialite friends, including Slim Keith, refused to ever speak to him again. Capote was reported to be particularly upset about losing Babe Paley's friendship. One report claims that Capote was crying in his house after his friends cut ties with him. He didn't expect such a ferocious response.
I didn't mean to. I thought they'd come back.
So, why did Truman Capote sabotage his closest friendships and turn the most powerful people in New York against him? According to psychologist Carolyn Mayer, when Capote first started hanging around with New York City's wealthy socialites, he initially craved acceptance. But she felt that as time went on and he got closer to these ultra-rich people, he grew to resent the elite world he'd managed to infiltrate. Mayer believes that Capote's uncanny ability to recollect entire conversations word for word made him a perfect source of gossip. Anyone who pried Capote for scandalous gossip about their closest friends revealed their ugliness to him, and he felt the need to document and expose that ugliness. As Truman Capote's mental issues worsened, Mayer theorizes, his judgment of the people around him also soured. The completed manuscript of Answered Prayers was never found and may never have existed, but an incomplete version was published by Random House in the UK in 1986 and in the US in 1987. Truman Capote died on August 25, 1984 at the age of 59. The cause of death was complications of liver disease, which was exacerbated by his long-standing struggles with alcohol and drug addiction. So now it's time for you to tell me in the comments what you think about why Truman Capote became the Judas to his women friends, and whether you think they should have forgiven him.